Hello guys, today let's talk about Aslan. I know that she was a special boss that we could get recently. I, in the end, just didn't get her because RNG wasn't in my favor. I kept getting co-op defenses at an abnormal point. So how exactly would one build her? What is she for? And what formations does she make sense in? So the first thing is you need to know that mono Wormwind users shouldn't be awaiting her to be that great, because she's actually not going to synergize so well with the mono Wormwind teams, because those are usually built around a decent amount of passers, leaders, and that's just not what she's there for. So let's get started. She can basically be put in every line, but she tends to be placed the same way one would use a Marianne, just for a simple reason that wherever she's in the team, all of her buffs are going to apply. So why would you put her in backline where you're going to need the survival buffs, in front line where you're going to need the passer, the assister, and not the assister, the leader, whatever buffs your striker, in this case usually a lane, and then your striker. And in midline, she can actually be used because she has some really good technique values, so that's usually where you're going to see her. Now, as center, not really, and that's why she's not going to get a position buff most of the time. Again, like I said, she's being placed the same way Marianne would be and being placed right here. Now, the one thing you need to know with her right off the bat is she's not good if you're trying to run a normal team, and she is usually extremely powerful if you're going to run some sort of funky team, usually running legends. So be aware of that. Now, even her ace is going to reflect that, increase the reflex and action speed of attackers and defenders by 25%. So again, that's really powerful if you have a lot of attackers and defenders. Strategy: increase the attack power and reflex of the allied team by 15% for 10 minutes, accumulates 3 times, meaning that if you can make her fast enough and give her enough spirit, she's going to be able to stack it. I'm going to say 10 minutes is kind of short, knowing that it accumulates 3 times and there's a 3-minute cooldown. The chances of you stacking it 3 times are basically microscopic, because by the time the first stack, the first one is going to disappear, but you can try. At least in a way, there's a stack lasting longer. Blitzkrieg, increase the reflex by 35% and critical damage by 35% of ally attackers and defenders. So again, attackers and defenders are gonna love her. She just buffed the shit out of their reflex and out of their critical damage. And then there's increase the steal by 50%, and the max life by 25% of allies, defenders, and gatekeepers. So again, she's buffing your gatekeeper from the mid line by 25% buff. That's epic. And then Vanguard, recovers spirit with an action or when being attacked. Yeah, that's pretty bad. So what exactly does this mean? In fast version, it means that your team needs to be highly constituted of attackers and defenders for her to make any sense whatsoever. Now you're going to tell me, it's very nice that you tell me that, but I don't really know who's an attacker or defender that's actually worth using. Now, I want to point out that this might sound a bit mean, but those are usually the strong legends, and the main names that are going to come out are mids that either have a Bell, a Duke, a Metatron, because all of those are attackers and defenders, and they're really going to gain from this. And the buffs that she's going to give to Metatron are just epic, increasing her skill by 50%. On top of it, combined with her active and her base skills, who are already really great, she's basically going to be buffing them epically. Now, you could even use her as an ace. I know a few COT stages using her as an ace and all of those skills combined can have some great value, and I've seen a few comps that are running that. Now, again, using her on the main team might feel a little bit weaker because of the lack of leaders, and she doesn't actually buff strikers, who kind of frustrates people because strikers used to be called attackers, and critical damage buff of 35% would be kind of useful. Now, we're not saying it's useless, but it kind of feels frustrating. So if you look at her chains, they're pretty decent. The friendship chain has F and I. Know a few people have actually been using her pretty decently. It really depends how you run her. Affection chain shouldn't matter. Then in the rival, we got Curl and we got Nerua. Those are both some extremely popular players in PvP. And in some COD stages, Nerua is really annoying. So this would be really nice. And the Nemesis, again, don't matter that much because usually you're the one running the Valkyria. So that's basically the main idea. So on a stone setup, how would we build her? Now again, I'm going to go more under the assumption that you're using her as a totem because that's her true value. And again, I do want to point out that if you look at her skills, there are no forms of damage resistance. So this is something to keep in mind when you're looking at her skills. Now she does buff herself as her class has been changed to Defender. So she is going to gain a self buff of 25% life, 50% steel, a reflex 45%, critical damage 45%, all of this by her own skill. So it's not that she isn't getting buffed, she just isn't getting buffed on a DR aspect, and she's being attacked by someone running red critical damage, who's the most common stone nowadays, is just going to be completely destructive for her. And let's not even talk about it being a Victoria on the other side. So how exactly would one build her? So we want resistance. As we can see already, she has some really decent technique and vitality values in her EE form. They're basically equal. Those values are great. So you can already say that vitality and technique are the things you're going to work on. Steel and power, just not going to have that value with such a low value. Less than 100 stat points under the other, more than 100 stat points under the other ones is just too low. And speed is decent, but you don't actually gain something on her acting. Her strategy is good, but it does burn spirit, and you sometimes need those actives for the front line, so you don't actually want her to max out on it. Unless you have one hell of a spirit gen on the line, but again, I'm going to question how that's possible. Now, let's look at this realistically. She has dark slots, so we're going to go again for the dark lifestone, just because of the nice buff it gives her more life, and it's going to give her that DR. So we're just going to throw that stone in just because it's a great stone, and there's nothing wrong with it. For the light stone, we're going to throw in the light reflex, just because she already has a very high reflex value because of her self buff, her base stats. We're going to throw 2 reflex stones on her, and we're going to be able to recover more spirit. Like this, at least when she's getting attacked, she generates enough spirit so she can try or throw on her active. There's no way to generate an entire bar unless we're changing some stones, we're not going to do it to Thunderstones, but it's going to be pretty damn close. So I would say throwing this would be really good. And then for the Wormwind slot, I'm going to say until you get the unique, throw the Wormwind DR. And then when you get the unique, as always, I would advise Protection of Mother Earth. Like this, she's going to have a decent survival, but without compromising on her reflex aspect. And then on the prime slot, depending on if you have a silken backline who can use her active or not, you're going to decide whether you really want the spirit for the active or if you want the critical resistance. But since she really doesn't have that much, critical resistance is going to be really minor, and you're not going to feel it as much as the spirit. So it really depends how much critical resistance you have. If you have an active backline with silk, or even if there is the dark I want to say legend, but they don't say legend Alice, you can throw this. And if not, I would say just go straight for the light reflex stone and get that extra spirit so you can try to spam that active as much as possible, who for once actually touches your striker. He's starting to get fed up that no one cares about it. Well, I'm kind of joking, but it's basically that the problem. So this is basically how she works. As I was saying, she doesn't work really in mono Wormwind teams because they're really strong based on their passives and their leaders, and this just doesn't work. Now, you can of course build your team around that, change a few players to increase the amount of them that you run, and if you're able to put a decent amount so that these buffs apply to a majority of players, then she has value. So this is why she's not really a player for mono Wormwind, she's more a player for a team that has high attackers and defenders. Again, as I was saying, the players that she's going to synergize the best with are usually legends, and those are going to be Belle, Metatron, and Duke. These are also really great for COT, so if you have those legends, throw her in backline and make her buff the reflex out of them. So if this helps you get a good idea of how she works, how she's run, and if you have any questions, comment, or requests, just leave a comment in the description below. Have a good day, guys.